大家早上好，我们还是简单听一下 Upst 的财报啊。我没有看，所以我们大概先看一下内容，看股价表现好像 OK 啊，应该是问题不大。看一下啊 ，Open 到还没有来得及看，所以我们等直播的时候 Open 到会讲。OK， 收入跟我想的差不多，160 ，OK， 那比去年有增长，对吧？亏损45 ，OK， net income OK，so far so good，OK， 这些我们之前都说过了 ，OK， 它一些产品的一些 highlight， 这张图是之前就有的，这个也是之前就有 ，OK， 这个没什么，它有一个 T Prime， 我们讲过这个啊，有个新的产品。UMI 我们说过 1.52 这是它的 loan 的在不同时间的表现这个趋势跟之前的基本类似这是它对社会的积极影响 OK 这张图它已经连续几个季度讲跟以前好像一眼看不出来多大区别，应该跟之前差不多 OK 这是它市场的数字OK， 这是真正的内容，所以它来自费的收入是167，比去年同期是上涨了14%就是我们说的开始一样业的正式增长，然后比上个季度涨了28%，因为上个季度比较差，是几乎是最低点130，还是有亏损，但是调整过的 EBITDA，基本上。是变成正的，就是说它现在还是会计亏损，但是没有烧钱了这是跟我们想的差不多。因为要会计盈利还需要，因为它还有股票的费用，所以会计盈利可能还需要一点时间。OK，balance sheet，主要是看这边的 loan，OK， 这个大幅减少。这个我不知道是第三季度包括最近的卖出那部分吗？因为。我的理解是应该比这还小，至少从现在看所以这是3季度末的数字，还有666，比之前接近1个 billion 要少。OK， 因为我没有给大家开放那个对话所以我希望大家能听得到。所以这个数字问题不大。OK， 所以就是 balance sheet 跟我们想的差不多 ，fully automated 差不多 ，conversion rate。有提高 ，OK， 这是算法以及现在的利率下降的原因所以这都不是问题。OK， 这是它具体的，它的 loan 当中 ，personal loan，OK， 还有这么多 testing 所以我估计我的理解的这部分拿掉了回头我们看一下。OK，committed， 所以这是。还是继续有增加，所以这个问题不大。Loan by product， 这是核心的是这个 Auto Secure HELOC，OK， HELOC 还是比较少，只有17个 million， 这是对吧？应该是 million。OK，outlook 这是比较重要的，下个季度。收入180，费是185，我估计4季度它是旺季应该是，所以估计这个数字他们会超它还是比较谨慎，我估计会比185还多不少，还是有亏损，调整够OK， 这个从利润上跟现在差不太多，好像感觉上 ，share count 好像略有增加 ，final OK。好像没有什么，我看他管理层有说什么吗？没有所以我的感觉是跟我们想的差不多我估计他4季度会比这个还好一些，但好多少不太知道。但是呢，4季度现在看起来要实现会计盈利。会有困难因为它这个35意味着说这里面 基本上都是股票新筹的费用，所以这部分还是要拿掉。好像我们就听管理层怎么讲吧，好像没有什么，跟我们预想差不多。我们看可这个还是同样这部分啊。Transaction OK。看到运营费用其实有不小的增加，所以他现在还是在招人，所以公司应该是缓过来了。管理层对未来还是显得比较有信心啊，要不然他应该会进入迅速减人的状态啊，所以应该是恢复元气了，基本上。这个应该比华尔街预期的应该要好，而且好不少，感觉上。OK， 他们开始了啊，我们就听一下这个。外面在下雨。
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's conference call to discuss Upstart's third quarter 2024 financial results. With us on today's call are Dave Gerard, Upstart's Chief Executive Officer, and Sanjay Datta, our Chief Financial Officer. Before we begin, I want to remind you that shortly after the market closed today, Upstart issued a press release announcing its third quarter 2024 financial results and published an investor relations presentation. Both are available on our investor relations website, ir.upstart.com. During the call, we will make forward-looking statements such as guidance for the fourth quarter of 2024 related to our business and our plans to expand our platform in the future. These statements are based on our current expectations and information available as of today and are subject to a variety of risks, uncertainty, and assumptions. Actual results may differ materially as a result of various risk factors that have been described in our filings with the SEC. As a result, we caution you against placing undue reliance on these forward-looking statements. We assume no obligation to update any forward-looking statements as a result of new information or future events, except as required by law. In addition, during today's call, unless otherwise stated, references to our results are provided as non-GAAP financial measures and are reconciled to our GAAP results, which can be found in our earnings release and supplemental tables. To ensure that we can address as many analyst questions as possible during the call, we request that you limit yourself to one initial question and one follow-up. On November 22nd, Upstart will be participating at the Wedbush Disruptive Finance Virtual Conference. Now, we'd like to turn it over to Dave Gerard, CEO of Upstart.
OK, CEO 开始发言。
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Gerard, co-founder and CEO of Upstart. Thanks for joining us on our earnings call covering our third quarter 2024 results. We know there's a lot going on this week, and we appreciate you making the time to be with us. I'm happy to report that we continue to strengthen Upstart's position as the fintech leader in artificial intelligence. With our Q3 results, it's clear that our team's efforts are driving improved financial performance today, as well as a stronger foundation for the quarters and years to come. With 43% sequential growth in lending volume and a return to positive adjusted EBITDA sooner than expected, we're pleased that Upstart's comeback story continues to play out as we anticipated. When I look across Upstart, I see improvements in so many areas that are important to our future. Our core product is growing quickly, has exceptional economics, and is delivering increasingly competitive rates across the credit spectrum. Our newer products are gaining traction, with both our auto and home lending products expanding nicely quarter to quarter. And our funding supply has never been more durable, with more committed capital than ever, powered by truly innovative partnership structures. Overall, credit performance continues to strengthen and gives us confidence that we're well calibrated to the macro. And finally, our velocity at delivering AI wins has never been better. Consistent with last quarter, these improvements weren't primarily driven by improvements to the macro economy. While the 50 basis point reduction in the Fed rate provided a modest
就业绩的提高并不是因为宏观的改变，而是公司基本面的变好。
quite elevated. And the Upstart macro index, while stable, continues to be well above the historical average. This is all to say that we believe any substantial macroeconomic wins remain in our future. Today, I'd like to share some details about the third quarter and the progress that we made. In our core personal loan product, we continue to iterate on our ability to rapidly launch increasingly sophisticated models. Model 18, which I described in some depth last quarter, drove large conversion improvements in Q3, which translated to much of the growth we're reporting today. We also continue to solve ML infrastructure and scaling challenges related to training frequency, process automation, and inference speed. We've set aggressive goals regarding data freshness for our machine learning team, which is critical to proper calibration in a volatile macro environment. We're also working hard to reduce model latency, even in the face of deploying more technically sophisticated models. In Q3 alone, we reduced model inference latency by 13%. I believe that our model training and deployment represent the state of the art in an industry that, for the most part, has yet to discover the power of predictive AI.
这样 AI model 的进
Q3
步
was Upstart's largest quarter of personal loan origination volume in 2 years, despite the significantly elevated rates I mentioned earlier. Our goal is to offer the best rates and best process to all Americans, and we're making significant strides in this direction. This means not just having the best models and highest levels of automation, but feeding them with the most efficient fuel, the capital, so that the end product, the loan, is consistently the best available. While this is a goal we can never 100% achieve, a constant, urgent, and determined effort to offer the best rate and the best process to everybody will make Upstart a formidable brand and a sustainable leader in the industry. Our T-Prime program, which we announced just a couple of weeks ago, takes a giant leap toward this goal by expanding our reach to the super prime end of the credit spectrum. By working closely with our lending partners, we're creating offers of credit that shine in comparison to anything in the market and bring us closer to a brand that can resonate with all Americans.
向高端客户进
Originations
出
of。Upstart auto loans increased 46% sequentially to $26.5 million. On the retail side, we signed our 11th certified digital retailing OEM agreement in October. This agreement increases Upstart's franchise dealer market opportunity by 14%. In October, we also began the rollout of a complete redesign of Upstart's in-store software product that improves usability and information access as we continue to modernize the technology stack used by dealerships across the country. On the refinance side, we recently upgraded the loan application experience, reducing the average time to fund from 19 days to 9. Car owners who refinance with Upstart now save an average of $800 per year, and we're optimistic that we can increase the amount saved by our borrowers in the months ahead.
它 Auto 现在主要是做 refi。
continues to scale like you'd expect from a fast-growing startup, with originations more than doubling on a sequential basis. And I'm also happy to report that with more than 600 HELOCs originated to date, we still have 0 defaults.
HELOC 没有坏
The
账。
product was driven predominantly by conversion rate improvements, a common theme if you've followed Upstart for long. Better targeting and higher qualification rates, combined with a 50% increase in close rates of those offered loans, led to these strong results. We exited Q3 with an instant approval rate for HELOC applicants of 49%, up from 42% in Q2. This means we're able to instantly verify applicants' income and identity without the need for tedious document uploads.
接近40%的 HELOC 是马上就批准的，不需要审批。
Covering 55% of the U.S. population. We expect to expand to more states with our HELOC product this quarter. We continue to invest heavily in servicing and collections. And as I've said before, we're particularly focused on leveraging machine learning to customize the borrower experience and improve repayment rates. And this effort is beginning to pay off. I'm increasingly confident that loan servicing and collections will become another area where we have unique and sizable competitive advantage over time. In Q3, we launched multiple personalization efforts, including optimizing the time of day to call and the time of day to send emails. We don't have concrete results for these initiatives yet, but they're part of our broader push to use machine learning and data to create a materially differentiated loan servicing experience.
他们把 AI 也推到服务跟收款上。
Without adding headcount to the team. And finally, we began exploring the use of large language models to reduce our spend even further. Our work to improve operational efficiency combined with machine learning means we believe we can continue to improve roll rates, even while reducing the cost of servicing each loan. Last quarter, we continued to see strong loan performance, with roll rates
有点小问题。
from one-day delinquent to charge-off down 13% year over year. Even more compelling is that 30-day delinquency rates have trended down sequentially through Q3, despite the fact that the third quarter has traditionally been a seasonally worse quarter for loan servicing.
三季度本来季节性是坏账比较高的，但现在是情况相反，坏账反而比较低，是好事。
We continue to strengthen our position quarter to quarter. A few weeks back, we announced a partnership with Blue Owl, whereby their Atalaya affiliate will purchase up to $2 billion in loans from the Upstart platform over 18 months.
这个18个月20亿美金的长期资本。
Well over half of our loan funding was in the form of longer-term committed partnerships. Today, I want to call out the incredible work done by our capital markets team, who have risen to the challenge of developing important and innovative partnerships with several of the market leaders in private credit. Innovation on the funding side of our business is a trend I expect to continue throughout 2025. Banks and credit unions continue to increase their funding on the Upstart platform as their liquidity improves and they ramp up their lending. This year, we signed 24 new lenders, which is already more new lenders and new capital than was added in all of 2023. In addition, more of our existing bank and credit union partners are expanding their lending programs with us, bringing more low-cost capital with more attractive rates to Upstart borrowers.
经过1年沉寂，现在银行也逐步开始回来。
I'm also pleased that loan funding has kept pace nicely with our regrowth of originations. The volume of loans on Upstart's balance sheet continues to trend down, even while loan originations have accelerated. We're also in a stronger cash position as a result. Keeping supply and demand in balance while we regrow our core business will continue to be a challenge, but we're in a strong position to manage this important dynamic. Last quarter, I told you that Upstart was turning a corner. Now I can say that we're clearly gaining momentum. Even without a significant boost from the macroeconomy, we're in growth mode and our credit is performing well. Our core business is expanding again and our newer businesses are making fast progress. We're hopeful that we'll see macroeconomic wins in the quarters to come, but we're not waiting around for them. Upstart's mission is simply to improve access to credit, and our strategy to accomplish this goal is to provide the best rates and best process to everybody. This isn't AI for AI's sake. It's because more than a decade ago, we recognized that it's the right tool to accomplish this ambitious goal. We believe that success in this regard will result in a generational company with immeasurable impact on American families and the U.S. economy. We're making rapid progress against this goal, and as a brilliant leader in our industry once said, it's day one here at Upstart.
Bezos.
Thank you, and now I'd like to turn it over to Sanjay, our Chief Financial Officer.
Upstart 的故事刚刚开始。
2024 financial results and guidance. Sanjay.
未来宏观会让公司增长更快。Sanjay CFO.
I'm sure it's been a distracting week for everyone here in the U.S. The macro environment continues to be an influential factor in our business. Though with respect to consumer credit, it has, in our view, remained relatively stable since our last report a quarter ago. As anticipated, this has allowed our risk models the freedom to continue improving borrower selection and driving conversion gains. Our belief is that inflation is largely behind us, a remnant trace from an historically large increase in the money supply that occurred between 2020 and 2021. The enduring strength of our labor market also continues to astonish. And in our view, the U.S. economy now suffers from a structural shortage of workers. making the odds of significant near-term unemployment, in our estimation, remote in any scenario short of an economic meltdown.
不会有大规模的失
Consumers in
业
the U.S. have continued their remarkable spending spree, perhaps even a little too remarkably for our taste, but Americans did enjoy a surge of disposable income entering 2024 that provided some support for the ongoing spend levels, as well as some welcome breathing room in savings rates. Consequently, consumer defaults on unsecured credit have stabilized over the course of the year, easing down from their peak to a lower but still elevated level of stress, as reflected in our Upstart Macro Index. Taken as a whole, the macro currents around us have become much less choppy, and in their current state no longer appear to represent a direct headwind to our business.
宏观不再是负面的影响。
Q3 of 2024. Revenue from fees was $168 million in Q3, up 28% sequentially from the prior quarter and 8% ahead of guidance, as various model accuracy enhancements continue to produce improved conversion. Net interest income was negative $5 million, less than half of the net interest income loss we experienced in the same quarter a year ago. Taken together, net revenue for Q3 came in at $162 million, $12 million above our guidance and up 20% year on year. The volume of loan transactions across our platform in Q3 was approximately 188,000 loans, up 64% from the prior year and up 31% sequentially,
多发了
and
40% 的
representing
贷
over
款。
118,000 new borrowers. Average loan size of $8,400 was up from $7,700 in the prior quarter, driven higher by
平
the
均 贷
model
款大概
which allowed
8000 美
more
金以
borrowers to
上，
qualify for full personal
贷款
loans
额。
at the expense of the smaller relief loans that they otherwise would have been presented with. Our contribution margin, a non-GAAP metric, which we define as revenue from fees minus variable costs for borrower acquisition, verification, and servicing, as a percentage of revenue from fees, came in at 61% in Q3, up 3 percentage points
贡献利润率
sequentially, and 4
61%，
percentage
非
points
常
above
高
our。guidance for the quarter. Our margins benefited from higher conversion rates on personal loans, as well as improved automation and efficiency in the borrower onboarding process. Operating expenses were $207 million in Q3, up 13% sequentially from Q2. Expenses that are considered variable, relating to borrower acquisition, verification, and servicing, were up 20% sequentially, less than the growth of the corresponding fee revenue base. Fixed expenses were up 12%, as the improved trajectory of the business triggered some catch-up accruals for expenses that were not being incurred earlier in the year at our lower volumes.
固定费用只增长了 12%， 比收入增长的要慢。
tight expense management as a core principle and have implemented some further streamlining of operational headcount since the end of the quarter. Altogether, Q3 GAAP net loss was $7 million, significantly ahead of guidance, and due in large part to gains made on the refinancing of some of our outstanding convertible debt. Adjusted EBITDA was positive $1 million,
会计亏损只有7个 million， 因为它有
and
一些
accomplishing our goal of breaking through to
贷款的
positive adjusted EBITDA 1 quarter
提前
ahead of
还的
schedule.
收益。
Adjusted earnings per share was negative 6 cents based on a diluted weighted average share count of 90.1 million.
这个比华尔街
We
预期
ended
的
the
好很
third
多。
quarter with loans on our balance sheet of $537 million before the consolidation of securitized loans, down from $686 million in the prior quarter, continuing the progress we've made over the past year in reducing the size of the balance sheet and establishing strong relationships with a handful of strategic capital partners. Of that loan balance, loans made for the purposes of R&D, principally auto loans, stood at $399 million. In addition to loans held directly, we continue to consolidate $119 million of loans from an ABS transaction completed in 2023, from which we retained a total net equity exposure of $18 million. We ended the quarter with $445 million of unrestricted cash on the balance sheet, up almost $70 million from the prior quarter. In Q3, we also completed the refinancing of roughly half of our outstanding convertible debt with a new issuance that pushes the maturities on this tranche out to 2029. On the funding side of our platform, we see encouraging signs that the markets are becoming increasingly constructive. Liquidity in
长期
the
资本
banking
越
and
来
credit
越
union sector
越来越容易
continues
拿
to
到。
improve, and increasing numbers of lenders are dropping their required rates of return on our platform.
而且对方要求
On
的
the
回报越来越
institutional
小。
side, the large amounts of money that have been raised under the banner of private credit initially earmarked mainly for corporate lending, are now increasingly finding their way over to consumer assets. In our return to the ABS markets this past month, we saw high levels of oversubscription and significant tightening of spreads for each class of bonds.
ABS 状况也比较好，我之前说过，它又回去了这个市场。
And once again embracing risk in the pursuit of yield. As we look ahead to Q4, we continue to presume a roughly stable macro environment with minimal change to credit trends in either direction.
四季度假定宏观稳定。
We expect the September 50 basis point rate cut from the Fed to work its way into our marketplace pricing over the course of this quarter, providing some modest lift to volumes. Beyond that, much of the growth we are anticipating this quarter will be driven by continuing improvements to our models and marketing campaigns.
增长还是来自于模型本身。
Application volumes and borrower approval rates. Expanded availability of funding is not perceived to be a driver of growth in this quarter, but we are assuming that it will also not constrain it. On the expense side, we will continue to pursue optimized margins and frugal fixed expense management. With this as context, our guidance for Q4 is total revenues of approximately $180 million,
180.
consisting of revenue from fees, $180 million, consisting of revenue from fees of $185 million, and net interest income of approximately negative $5 million.
这个数字也越来越小了。
Contribution margin of approximately 59%, net income of approximately negative $35 million, adjusted net income of approximately negative $5 million, adjusted EBITDA of approximately positive $5 million, and a diluted weighted average share count of approximately 91.7 million shares. Thanks to all once again for joining us on this call. And now, Dave and I will be happy to open up the lines for any questions.
好像没什么问题。
Thank you. And if you would like to ask a question, please signal by pressing star 1 on your telephone keypad. If you're using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. Again, you can press star 1 to ask a question, and we'll pause for just a moment to allow everyone an opportunity to signal for questions. Our first question is coming from the line of Peter Christensen with Citi.
Good evening. Thanks for the question here. Dave, Sanjay, I was just curious if you could talk about underlying use cases on the personal loan side. If you've seen any changes there, there's this notion that a debt consolidation wave could help you on the volume side quite a bit, certainly on the demand side. Just curious if you're seeing any mixed changes in use cases for personal loans. Thank you.
问个人贷款的大家使用有没有变化？
Hey, Pete, this is Dave. I don't think there's any
应该没有。
change. Personal loans have always been a fairly generic tool that consumers can use in a lot of different ways, paying for weddings, paying off debt, paying for a large purchase, etc. And I think that utility continues to be there. But I don't think we've observed any dramatic change in the use cases.
就是没有。
Appreciate that. Thank you.
水分太大了，这些问题没什么营养。
Our next question is coming from Ramsey El-Assal with Barclays.
Hi, great. Thank you very much. This is John Coffey on the call for Ramsey. I just had two questions for you. I think, Sanjay, in the past couple of earnings calls, you spoke quite a bit about some of the slower recovery in your prime customers. So I was wondering if you could tell me what that recovery looks like, again, in your prime base. Are we close to the middle, the beginning, or the end? And then I guess my second question is just on the trajectory of EBITDA. I know we have a positive number this quarter where you're expecting another one next quarter. Should that be a pretty smooth runway in future years, just generally speaking, or are there any one-offs we should keep in mind?
就是问那个 EBITDA 会不会平均，
Hey, John.
以及那个比较好的贷款人的坏账情况。
On the second question, with respect to EBITDA, as you've seen, we've broke through to sort of break-even / positive EBITDA this quarter. We're guiding up next quarter, and as long as we are successful in continuing to improve our models, improve conversion, and grow, we would expect that EBITDA would follow suit.
就只要收入涨，最后利润肯定会涨。
And sorry, John, can you remind me of your first question?
Yeah, the status of the Prime customer. I know you said they were sort of later to
就是比较好的那些
coming back, but you said some of that return to the Prime customer.
他们的坏账情况怎么样
was a little delayed. I think you spoke about it quite a bit. I think the last call or two.
Yeah, thanks for refreshing. On the sort of the trend of consumer repayments and defaults and the various segments within that, we did call out the fact that there was a bit of a phasing difference between lower prime and higher prime consumers, in that the lower prime consumers were impacted.
这两个组进入坏账高峰的时期不一样，我们之前直播中说过了啊，那些比较差的进入的早，比较好的进入的晚，大概中间差3到6个月。
Still had not quite stabilized. I think we see that all sort of reconverging to a place of stability across the spectrum right now. And so if you take our macro index as a high-level indicator of where where the aggregate numbers are on consumer repayments, we don't perceive there to be any real remaining segment differences. And that's why, as you may have heard in another announcement, we sort of announced that we're leaning in more confidently into the prime segment with the T Prime program.
就现在这两部分都没问题了，所以他未来不会太在意那个 Prime 那部分啊，就是未来不会变成一个很大的负面的东西。
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I just kind of, David, I just want to go back to some of the comments you made on the kind of the opening remarks. Like, some of your performance, you said, or a lot of this performance is, kind of driven by inherent improvements in your own kind of model and not as much with kind of these lower interest rate cuts. I'd love to see if you can kind of expand on that a little bit more and provide some metrics and also if you can kind of give us an idea of like how these lower interest rates will sort of add to some of the tailwinds that you're seeing.
之前他们就说过了，这个其实就是问为什么宏观不是问题，为什么它现在的增长主要是自己的模型在决定。
Support from that in September, so not all that meaningful over the course of the quarter. Going forward, we certainly hope we'll get more boost. But really, the growth in the third quarter was really due to model upgrades. That we're upgrading our AI models constantly, but sometimes we get just small, modest wins, and other times we get very large wins. And Model 18, which I first mentioned in the call 3 months ago, was probably one of the bigger launches in upgrades to the system than we've had in quite some time. And what that really means is much more increased separation of risk, and that very commonly leads to higher conversion. You can think of it as basically, it's identifying riskier people and eliminating them from the borrower pool, and the net is you can lower the rates and approve more other people. And also the level of automation is at our all-time high. Over 90% of the loans are fully automated. Both of those contribute to growth and to just getting more people through the funnel, which is very, fundamental to those numbers that we put up there.
所以你看，这 conversion rate 很明显的，去年统计10%，现在上升到16%，所以这是算法，这跟宏观没有关系。
Roughly kind of half of your loan volume now is through, committed capital, and if that's the case, as we look for the next couple of years, we get into like a more like normalized rate environment. When you think of committed capital versus like opportunistic capital, how do you think that thing will balance? Because I know kind of, before we went into this like tough environment, you almost did not have like a lot of committed capital, but now you're at about like half of that. How do you think that will trend over the next couple of years?
这个问题问了好几次了，就是长期资本跟其他资本的比例的变化。
Having a significant portion of the capital being committed today, it may even be more than we would like. Historically, if you went back a couple of years, the funding on the platform was entirely at will, month to month, by design. And as we decided a couple of years ago, we wanted to start to have much more committed capital. Think of it, more like a supply chain of capital and a little less like just a pure marketplace. And that's really helped, and that's what's really supplying a lot of the fuel for growth today, is that well over half of it is committed capital. Having said that, I think there is a place for kind of a spot market, if you will, where capital can come and go. There's capital that will come in and will ultimately take loans to securitization when the ABS markets are functioning. So I don't think we ever want 100% committed capital, because there's this kind of market creation happens with at-will capital as well. So a healthy balance will be good, but certainly we like today having a lot of committed capital, a lot of long-term partners that we can create a lot of value for, and they can create value for us as well.
同样的问题就会有同样的答案。
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. I'll hop back in queue.
这个回答过2-3次了，同样的问题。
Our next question is coming from James Fawcett with Morgan Stanley.
Hi, everyone. It's Michael Infante for James. Thanks for taking our question. I just wanted to ask on the small dollar loans, obviously reaching break-even economics here. Like, how should we be thinking about incremental variable cost reduction there and sort of the impact on approval rates broadly?
问小额贷款就是它的单位经济效益会不会还能提高？
Dave, the small dollar product essentially is really kind of a way to get somebody into the system who wouldn't be approved for a larger loan, generally speaking. And it is generating positive economics. It's actually not a drain in us whatsoever. They're very short-term loans. They turn over, the capital turns over super quickly. So I don't think we see that as any kind of drain on the system. They are, as I said, positive economics. It's really expanding the boundary of who we can approve. A lot of those small dollar borrowers will come back later and get personal loans or maybe refinance an auto loan, et cetera. So for us, it's really helpful. It's also helping train our AI models on a lot of borrowers that it would not have otherwise seen. So it kind of keeps pushing, the boundaries of what we can approve. I don't know, Sanjay, if you want to add anything to that.
这个他们之前讲过，这种小额贷款主要是一个市场，他拿到这些贷款人，所以给他一个很小的，而且很快就还的，只要不亏钱就 OK。
On impact of a change in administration broadly, I know it's obviously tough to prognosticate about direction of the overall unemployment rate, but if we are in this world in which unemployment rate is lower, credit is generally better, like how are you thinking about sort of like run rate origination trajectory that we should be cognizant over the next, call it, 12 to 18 months?
这是贷款的趋势。
Well, with respect to the administration, I mean, I think the market, as you can see in the last day or so, kind of likes a business-friendly Republican administration historically. So that's not.
共和党的总统总体会对股市更好一些。总体。
Four different administrations and had very engaged relationships.
但是谁当总统关系不大。
So we don't really see, which party's in power in DC as a central factor in our business. So very happy, and we've made a ton of progress working with regulators, particularly around the use of AI and fairness in lending and those kind of issues. So we feel very good about that. Generally speaking, our growth as a company has almost always come internally, not externally, meaning improvements in the models and, getting more and more funding, improving models, being able to approve more people, these newer products that are coming out appealing to a different set of people. The T-Prime program now has more competitive offers for much more prime borrowers. So all these are the kind of things that we just keep, I think we can grow on. And certainly, as the consumer risk drops, the Upstart macro index, as that goes down, that is certainly a tailwind to us, as is, Fed rates, the benchmark rates going down. So those are all good things. But as I kind of said in the remarks, we aren't waiting around for, Fed rates to drop or for UMI itself to drop. We really believe we can drive consistent growth really through just the kind of improvements we make to our models quarter in and quarter out.
所以宏观经济 OK， 利率下降当然是好事，但是不下降它也能增长，因为它的模型越来越好，而且审批通过率会持续增长。
Hi guys, I wanted to ask about T-Prime and your expansion into super prime. Can you just fill us in on how you get paid in that business? Is it any different And then how do the take rates and contribution margins compare to the core business?
就是 T prime 的它的单位经济效益如
Sure,
何
Rob, that's a good question.
我估计会差一些。
Essentially, we don't like do any loans that there aren't positive unit economics on. So we would never do this in a way that we would intentionally
不赚钱的贷款不做。
lose money on the loan. So they are positive, but certainly across the spectrum, the more prime you are, the more you're at that end of the spectrum, the thinner margins are because you have just a more heavily competed consumer. And
客户越好，风险越低，你当然赚的就越少啊，这是肯定的。
For them in terms of very relatively low loss rate product, which is very good for our credit union and bank partners. It has a nice yield, and we make less on it, though we have a very positive contribution margin. If you look at our business today, contribution margins are super high compared to where they were historically. In the range of 60%, whereas when in the middle of 2021 they were in the mid 40s, I believe. So we expect our contribution margins to come back down to earth as our volumes expand, and we don't think T Prime's going to upset that in any dramatic way. But this is essentially also important to say this is sort of a part of the market we have just not participated in historically.
低风险的市场，它之前做的几乎没有，所以现在利润低一点，但是可能还是可以赚钱的，所以其实无所谓。
Okay, thanks. And then, somewhat relatedly, just wanted to get your thoughts on the broader competitive landscape. You're going into T Prime.
我估计没什么变化。
Like SoFi, who's doing their own loan platform business that seems to be targeted
SoFi
more
我们
towards
讲过
your
了。
main demographic. What do you guys think about all of that? How intense do you feel the competition is today? And then how do you manage around that competition to make sure you're protecting your targeted cash flows going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we've always operated in a very competitive environment. In some sense, from a consumer perspective, a loan is a loan. And for us, having proprietary underwriting that we think is creating separation has always been the center of our thesis. We can improve more people at lower rates. We can avoid the people you don't want to lend to. And increasingly with what we're talked about with T Prime is we can compete across the credit spectrum. So certainly there'll always be a lot of competition, but we like our model. It can be, a loan can be originated and held by a credit union or a bank at a very modest yield and a very low risk. We also have relationships with the private credit market, very successful in ABS. So there's just, I think a platform that can move really quickly. And I think controlling all parts of this, from the data that's collected that the model is trained on, servicing these loans, et cetera, means it's a very healthy approach we have. A lot of competition has very different models out there, whether they be banks or other types of fintechs. But we like our play in it. But it's a vast market, and there's room for multiple players for sure.
这个市场一直是很多竞争。个人无抵押贷款在美国有几十家公司，大大小小都在做，所以这个其实没有什么变化。最近几年并没有特别新的，所以只有 Upst 是纯是算法领先的。
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Thanks for taking the questions. I wanted to start off, on the rate cut commentary. You guys mentioned in your prepared remarks that the September cut is expected to work its way through into the fourth quarter. If there's further easing and we had to cut today, should we think about these as being potential tailwinds at like a 1 to 2 quarter lag, or is there another way to kind of incorporate that into our own assumptions?
9月、11月份都有利率下降啊，对你为什么没有大的影响？它4季度还是比较保守的估计。
A rate cut by the Fed first requires warehouses and other financing mechanisms to adjust, and then thereafter we'll begin to sort of reflect that in our core pricing. And so I think a lag of 1 to 3 months is probably reasonable.
这时候中间大概要等1到3个月会体现出来。
Maybe switching gears, I know you guys mentioned the average loan size was a little bigger, and part of that's due to model improvements. Maybe any thoughts about, does that impact, some of the progress or, initiatives you guys had been making, on the small dollar product, or, does that now get shifted to a different type of consumer if some of those guys that were taking the smaller loans can now qualify for longer ones? Just how that fits into the near-term growth algorithm would be very helpful.
小额贷款怎么转到比较大的其他贷款当中去？
I guess in the grand scheme of things, when either risk is lower or required returns are lower and more people can qualify for larger loans, it does mean that less of them are taking what they otherwise would have been offered, which is maybe a smaller dollar loan. I think that overall is good for the ecosystem and for the borrowers. It may have obviously impacts on average metrics like loan size, et cetera, but I think overall we would view that as a positive in the environment.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
问题都比较简单和重复，其实。
Our next question is coming from David Schwartz with Citizens JMP.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my questions. Most have been answered, but just two quick follow-ups. First, on the expense side, Sanjay, I think you said there was some catch-up accruals in the third quarter, and I'm wondering if you could quantify how much of Q3 expense levels might be non-recurring and how much specifically in the fourth quarter we should think of for marketing.
就是第四季度的这个运营费用，尤其市场费用怎么估计？
Yeah, I think let me just on the back of a cocktail napkin, I think you could think of that as sort of like $5 million-ish in excess expense that maybe was otherwise would have been sort of captured earlier in the year and was sort of captured as a one-time catch-up this quarter.
就是这个207当中，大概5个 million 是一次性的，第三季度记的，就是不会重复的，所以影响不大。
As we think about CAC, is similar to third quarter levels?
Okay.
Yeah. I don't perceive there to be any large changes coming.
Okay. And then just lastly, on the funding side, I think earlier in the year, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Castle Lake arrangement included some form of risk sharing or mandated risk retention. Is that the case with Atalaya recent deals, or are these just kind of strict flow arrangements?
这个没有听之前的管理层怎么讲，他问。
Yeah, the Atalaya deal has a version of co-investment where we
都一样的，就是长期资本都需要 Upst 有大概5%的要同样放进去，这个基本知识不扎实。
Our next question is coming from Simon Clinch with Redburn Atlantic.
Hi everyone. Thanks for taking my question. I was wondering, Dave or Sanjay, could you talk a bit about the conversion rates and how we should think about that progressing as Model 18 really starts to drive through? And I ask this because while you delivered some great upside to numbers this quarter, I thought the conversion rate would have been higher to deliver that, and it only.
他觉得16%还是太低了，为什么不更高一点？
I'm just curious as to how to think about that going forward.
因为它的 margin 还是比较高。
I mean, conversion rate getting higher is a good thing. It's sort of sort of contributes directly to growth. It's not the only thing that contributes to growth. So depending on how acquisition's working, et cetera. But you should expect when we make model improvements, when we increase automation, things of that nature, it will drive conversion rate up. But there's always this like sort of trade-off where suddenly it makes sense to spend more in marketing or some other type of expense, and it can drive it back down. So conversion rate doesn't grow to the sky, if you will, because there will always be an interest from our side in effect investing more once conversion rate reaches a certain point.
就是这 conversion rate 跟贡献利润是反比的，所以你要想收的低一点呢，你就可以多批一点，但你现在收的比较高，所以你这个不可能太高。
So has that changed?
Hey Simon, this is Sanjay. So maybe one additional consideration that's newer in this multi-product world than in the old days when we were really largely a single product is that, for example, we were converting some people into small dollar loans, And as the model accuracy improves, more of those are being converted into full personal loans. And so that's not an improvement to conversion per se, because each one of those is counted as a convert. It's just a much more lucrative conversion. So I think maybe what we can try to do over the next couple of quarters is give you guys more insight into, product level conversion where it'll be more meaningful to the economics.
所以这个 conversion rate 它反映了不同的产品之间的组合，所以你要有新的产品比较多 ，right？ 所以它本身就会把这个拉低一些，所以它以后会不会每个产品或者至少个人无抵押贷款这部分单独给你分？
Well, congratulations. It's great to see the continued progress securing committed funding arrangements. I guess on that topic, it looks like the co-invest capital or the assessed value moved up about $100 million linked quarter. I'm curious about when you think about that on a go-forward basis, is there a rough sense of how fast that should be growing, quarter over quarter, especially as volumes continue to improve from here? And also, is there an upper bound to where you'd want that to be relative to capital or cash? And hopefully not too compounded a question, but then I'd be curious roughly where the percentages are, or what kind of par is outstanding relative to that co-invest as of the third quarter.
Co-invest 之前说都5%，他说这个会未来怎么增长
So I think the rough framework or the rough model you can use to think about this, and we've sort of signaled this in the past, is that in these particular deals, we expect to be somewhere in the mid to high single digits as a co-investment.
大概5%的，他要自己放进去。
That's generally true, and it continues to be true. Now, I think in quarters where we sign big deals, such as the Blue Owl/Atalaya deal, and very often those deals are accompanied by large backbook transactions as well in order to seed the relationship and sort of seed the utilization of the financing facilities. Then there can be a bigger one-time sort of jump in the committed capital dollars level, and that's true of this quarter as a result of the Blue Owl deal. Those are more a function of deal signings than ongoing forward flow investment. But I think writ large, I think a mid to high single digit percentage of the flow which is committed, and as Dave said, that's sort of somewhere over half of our total volume right now, is the right amount for us to scale on. And the total amount that we're comfortable with, I think, is really a function of the size and scale of our platform, because obviously as it gets bigger and as our business is throwing off more money, we're able to put more of it in dollar terms into these arrangements. But I think that overall, as a percentage of the total volume we're doing, it should be some single-digit percentage.
所以这个比重5%未来不会太大变化，但这个绝对数量会继续涨，因为它的整个平台在涨。
Should we just think about somewhere in the mid to high single digits? Is what that 334 represents, or is there any kind of like ballpark of what the principal exposure looks like at this point?
Yeah, that $334 million is a mid-single-digit percentage of the total amount of origination dollars, that it was used to generate.
所以就是 Upstart 投了334，那意味着说别人投了比这个大概19倍。
Do you have any sense of where the take rate moved this quarter? I realize we'll get the data from the 10Q, but I'm curious when we think about kind of the gross take rate movement. I'm assuming it applies.
这个季度的佣金比例是大概10%多少？
Good way of thinking of it, and I'm curious if you can give a rough sense of, are some of the higher prime loans coming on with a low single-digit take rate or a mid-single-digit take rate, or a rough sense of where that
应该超过10%，感觉。
Yeah, sure, Giuliano. I think the take rate is in roughly the same ballpark as in prior quarters. I think in this particular quarter it may be very slightly down. Some of it has to do with the mix between institutional funding and LP funding. Some of it is maybe a function of this T-Prime program that we're scaling, which, as Dave said, has smaller but still positive margins. And some of it is frankly experimentation. As we scale, we're always trying to find the optimum elasticity or the optimum price given elasticity in different segments, and that allows us to experiment a little bit with some percentage of our traffic. And I think the combination of those three create a bit of push and pull with take rates. But net, I think they're in the same ballpark, maybe marginally lower than last quarter.
就是比上个季度差不多，可能略低一点，我估计还是在10%以上。他说，因为资金的来源啊，以及他新的产品，比如 T Prime 他可能也收的会少一点，因为风险比较低，所以总体会稍微拉低一点点。好像结束了，比较快。
Just want to say thanks to all for joining us today. We're excited about our position and our velocity toward the future. We think our business is really beginning to hit on all cylinders again. We appreciate you joining us, especially during this super busy week, and we look forward to talking to you in the new year.
变回
Thanks for joining.
快速增长的一家公司啊，基本上就这个啊，所以其实跟我们想的一样。没有什么，就是这个问题其实都比较简单，甚至低级啊，所以我可能今天就不会单独做视频讲他讲了什么问题，我觉得这问题没有必要重复。但这里面有一个东西我刚才没有讲，细看这个蛮有意思啊，就是这个他同时自己投进去这5%这个投入这部分资本啊，他有一个每个季度他有一个自己的 assessment， 说我这部分会大概是会亏多少，有个预期啊。其实大家这个蛮有意思，它就代表了它的至少它长期资本这部分它放进去的坏账预期大概怎么样。它从开始比如说从去年开始的时候，他当时投入了66个 million 啊，他当时预期是73，就是说他觉得我其实投的这个风险反而比较小啊，所以他的我投进去这些可能会值更多啊，所以这个73比66大啊，所以这是相当于是它的风险比较低。到了上个季度我说过啊，这个数字就有转折啊，就他当时总共投入236个 million， 但他自己估计这些市场值225啊。当时有人就担心，我说因为这其实意味着说他可能胆子比较大了，所以愿意承受额外的一些风险。我觉得这两者不应该完全是相同，或者我这种比这个还高的其实不适合，因为你总要承担一定的风险，要不然的话其实意义不大，对吧？所以你看这个季度又有变化，他总共投入334，他现在自己的估计啊，他可以收回来331啊，所以这个数字基本相同了啊，所以就是说他这在一个季度之内啊，因为他这种比较大的变化意味着他上个季度的预期的一部分坏账，我的猜测是他现在觉得可能不是坏账所以这也其实从另外一个角度证明了管理层至少他自己的判断，他现有的这些投资，包括他的合作伙伴，因为如果他自己觉得自己不会亏钱因为他是在最底层就如果要亏钱，他先亏亏完了这5%才会亏到他的长期合作伙伴的。所以如果他自己觉得他都不怎么会亏那合作伙伴那个钱那个收益基本上是非常有保障的所以第一证明合作伙伴应该很开心第二个是证明说他相比3个月之前他对坏账的预期明显要好所以这是另外一个算是佐证所以就这样了，我们就不讲了就是所以我们就是回头赶直播吧，但有问题提出来，我回头仔细再看一下 Open Door 的就是他对这个季度我相信跟我们想的应该差不多，关键是4季度我相信跟我们预想还差不多，因为是淡季嘛，所以他业绩不可能好，所以关键是对明年尤其是旺季的预期管理层怎么计划的，关键看他自己的表达如何。所以呢我们会看那个所以大家有问题会员请留言我们直播的时候再见谢谢大家，拜拜。